The sun was beating down hard on the dusty town of Willow Creek, its golden rays casting long shadows across the crumbling sidewalks and tired storefronts. At the edge of town, nestled between an old diner and a boarded-up movie theater, sat Mason's Auto Repair. It wasn't much to look at: faded red paint peeling from the walls, a crooked sign hanging by a single rusted chain, but it was home to Mason Carter, the best and most honest mechanic for miles around. Mason was in his late 20s, with calloused hands, a permanent smudge of grease on his cheek, and a heart bigger than the sky. Life hadn't been kind to him. He lost his parents young, dropped out of high school to care for his younger sister, and had been working ever since to make ends meet. Despite the hardships, he never let bitterness take root in his soul. To Mason, every stranger was a friend he hadn't met yet, and every broken car was a puzzle he couldn't wait to solve. One sweltering afternoon, as Mason wiped the sweat from his brow and leaned back to stretch his aching muscles, he heard the unmistakable sputter of an engine in distress. He stepped outside just as a sleek black car, a luxury model far too expensive for anyone around these parts, rolled into his lot, coughing and wheezing like a dying animal. Mason's eyebrows shot up. It wasn't every day that something like that showed up in Willow Creek. The car jerked to a stop, and the driver's door swung open. Out stepped a young woman, dressed simply in jeans and a white t-shirt, her chestnut hair pulled back in a loose braid. There was something about her, something different, but Mason couldn't quite put his finger on it. She looked around uncertainly, shielding her eyes from the sun. "Hi there," Mason called, grabbing a rag to wipe his hands. "Looks like you're having some trouble." The woman smiled, a little embarrassed. "Yeah, you could say that. I think something's wrong with the engine. I was just passing through town when it started making weird noises." Mason chuckled warmly. "Well, you came to the right place. Let's take a look." She introduced herself as Emily. No last name, no mention of where she was headed. Mason didn't press. It wasn't his way to pry into other people's business. He popped the hood and leaned in, whistling lowly at the complex machinery. Most cars around here were old pickup trucks and hand-me-down sedans, not luxury vehicles with computer systems more advanced than half the town. Still, a car was a car, and Mason loved a challenge. As he worked, Emily watched him. There was a steadiness to Mason, a patience she rarely saw anymore. He didn't rush, didn't cut corners. When he spoke, it was with careful explanations, not technical jargon meant to confuse or upsell her. She noticed the way he paused to make sure she understood, the way he smiled easily, even as sweat dripped from his forehead. After about an hour of diagnostics and some careful adjustments, Mason straightened up. "Well, Miss Emily, looks like you had a faulty fuel injector and a couple of bad sensors. I cleaned it up and replaced the broken parts. Should be good as new." Emily looked worried. "That sounds expensive." Mason shrugged. "Parts weren't too bad, and I don't charge labor for simple jobs like this. Just enough to cover the cost." She blinked. "You're serious?" "Of course," he said, genuinely puzzled. "Why would I charge you more? You're stranded in a strange town. Seems wrong to take advantage." Emily's heart twisted in her chest. If only Mason knew. If only he knew she wasn't just a lost traveler. If only he knew her last name was Emily Dalton, the daughter of one of the wealthiest men in the country, the heiress to a multi-billion-dollar empire. She was on a journey of her own, searching for something money couldn't buy: honesty, kindness, and someone who saw her for who she was, not what she was worth. And here he was. Emily reached for her wallet, pulling out a thick wad of bills. Mason shook his head, holding up a hand. "No need for all that. $70 should cover it." She stared at him, speechless. $70? She could buy this entire garage 100 times over. Yet here was this man, offering nothing but help, expecting nothing but a fair price. With shaking hands, she paid him and tucked an extra few bills under a nearby toolbox when he wasn't looking. She didn't want to insult his pride, but she couldn't walk away without doing something. As Mason handed her the keys, Emily hesitated. "Can I ask you something?" she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Sure. Why are you so kind?" Mason smiled, a little sadly. "Because the world needs more kindness. And if I can make it a little better, even for just one person, then maybe it's all worth it." Emily drove away with tears blurring her vision, her heart pounding wildly in her chest. She had come to Willow Creek on a whim, tired of the constant noise of high society, The fake smiles, the shallow conversations. She hadn't expected to find something real here. She hadn't expected to find Mason. Days passed, but Emily couldn't get him out of her mind. She found herself driving back into town under the guise of needing another checkup on her car. Mason welcomed her with the same open-hearted friendliness, never suspecting a thing. Each visit turned into longer conversations. Coffee at the diner. Walks through the tiny town square. She learned about his dreams, to someday expand his shop, to build a better life for his sister, to maybe one day have a family of his own. He learned almost nothing about her, because Emily wasn't ready to share the whole truth. Not yet. One afternoon, as the sky turned a brilliant shade of orange, Emily and Mason sat on the hood of her now perfectly running car, sipping sodas and watching the sunset. "You ever think about leaving?" she asked. Mason shrugged. "Sometimes. But then I think, maybe I'm meant to be here. Maybe I'm meant to help people right where I am." She smiled, a tear slipping down her cheek before she could stop it. "What about you?" Mason asked, nudging her playfully. "You're not from around here. What are you looking for?" Emily hesitated, the truth heavy on her tongue. But then she simply said, "I'm looking for something real." Mason looked at her then, really looked, and for a moment, the world stood still. "Me too," he said quietly. The next week, Emily's secret was blown open in the most unexpected way. A television news crew, tracking her for a business magazine profile, rolled into Willow Creek, cameras flashing and microphones thrust into her face. They called her Emily Dalton, America's hidden heiress, right there in the middle of Main Street, right in front of Mason. His face went pale. He stepped back as if she'd struck him. Emily turned to him, panic rising in her chest. "Mason, I was going to tell you. I was going to." He didn't say anything, just stood there, looking at her like she was a stranger. The news crew swooped in, eager to catch every angle of the story, but Emily pushed past them, running after Mason. "Please," she cried, grabbing his hand. "I didn't want you to see me like them. I just wanted you to know me." Mason stared down at her hand in his, then up at her tear-streaked face. For a long moment, he said nothing. Finally, he spoke. "Why me?" The words were raw, broken. "Because you're the kindest, most honest person I've ever met. Because you see people, not money, not status. Just people. I needed that. I needed you." The vulnerability in her voice tore at Mason's heart. Slowly, carefully, he pulled her into his arms. "It's not about who you are," he whispered. "It's about who we are together." In that dusty little town, beneath the golden sunset, a billionaire heiress and a poor mechanic found something that money could never buy. A love built on trust, kindness, and the simple, unshakable power of humanity. And it was only just the beginnings.